The 7th of October marks the two-year anniversary of Hamas's deadly attacks on southern Israel, which according to Israeli estimates resulted in 1,000 people being killed and over 250 people seized and taken to Gaza. It also marks 2 years since Israel launched its devastating bombardment and siege on Gaza. According to the United Nations, more than 90% of homes have been destroyed in Gaza. Most of the 2.3 million strong population of Gaza have been forced to flee their homes. Palestinian health officials say it's killed 67,000 people, and the UN-backed Global Hunger Monitor has said that it's sparked famine. The situation is so dire that a UN Commission of Inquiry recently concluded that Israel has committed and is committing genocide in Gaza. The Israeli officials vehemently deny this. But amid this unprecedented bloodshed, there is a glimmer of hope. US President Donald Trump released a 20-point peace plan, which, at least in part, appears to have been accepted by all sides of the conflict. And right now, the negotiations are taking place in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt to put that plan, at least partly, into action. As always, the devil is in the details. Benjamin Netanyahu agreed to the plan in a press conference with Donald Trump, but his interpretation of the text seemed to be very different to a statement released later on by Hamas, who also partially accepted terms of the deal. Regional countries have piled pressure on this, including countries like Qatar and Egypt that have been involved in the negotiations, Arab and Muslim majority countries who've expressed their support, but again, their version of the text seems to be very different to what's being promoted in Israel. So what are the terms and what are the sticking points? At the heart of the conversations right now is the release of the 48 remaining hostages and captives. But it's clear that Hamas is not going to hand over their only negotiating card without getting something in return. And that's where the difficulties lie. At the press conference for the announcement of this plan, Netanyahu made it very clear that there would be no Palestinian state. He also said the 20-point peace plan was entirely aligned with the 5 principal points that his security cabinet had voted on, which includes Israel retaining security responsibility for Gaza. In the 20-point peace plan, Hamas is expected to disarm, Gaza will be demilitarized, and Hamas will not have any future in a Palestinian state or even in the interim running of Gaza. Instead, there'll be a transitional authority led by technocrats and overseen by what is known as the Board of Peace, which Donald Trump said he will head up alongside former UK Prime Minister Tony Blair. In Hamas's statement responding to this, they talked about Hamas still being engaged in a Palestinian national dialogue, so not disappearing completely. They also failed to mention or agree to the disarmament of their forces or the demilitarization of Gaza. The other key sticking point is, of course, Palestinian statehood. Countries, including the UK, have recognized a Palestinian state, angering many of the far-right members of the Israeli government. Figures like Smotrich, who have talked about there never being a Palestinian state, who've talked about the total destruction of Gaza, and who've even spoken about Gaza being turned into a, quote, real estate bonanza, where Israel and the US would effectively split up this prime Mediterranean coastline. The key other question is who is going to run Gaza day 2, and what is the deadline for the withdrawal of Israeli troops. Trump's peace plan has one single deadline, which is the 72-hour handover of hostages and captives. Nothing mentions a timeline for the withdrawal of Israeli forces. In fact, US key officials, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio, have talked about Israeli forces only withdrawing to what is known as the Yellow Line. According to Israeli media, that would be, in some instances, 6 kilometers into Gaza and would not include Israel withdrawing from key cities like Rafah. At the same time, Donald Trump has made it very clear that this is the final chance for a deal. So there is massive, massive pressure as we are in the second anniversary of this horrific conflict. We certainly feel like we're closer to a deal than we have been, at least since the last deal was agreed in January. But there's massive daylight between what all sides see that deal being. There is massive international pressure on these talks right now. Donald Trump has said that if Hamas doesn't agree, they would face obliteration. He's warned of massive bloodshed in the days coming if nothing succeeds. The families I speak to in Gaza, the medics, the first responders, describe an unimaginable reality of living off a single bowl of rice every day because of the bombardment, losing dozens of members of their family and their friends in the bombing, having to be on the run 7, 8, 9 times, their home being destroyed, their livelihoods, and living with life-changing injuries. In Israel, the relatives of the hostages tell me that every second their loved ones remain in Gaza, their lives are at risk. For them, the only way out of this nightmare is for an immediate ceasefire, for the unfettered delivery of humanitarian aid, the return of the hostages and captives, and then a global effort to rebuild Gaza and build a brighter, better future for everyone.